Yeah, I'll talk about that in the catch up. All right.
All right, sweet.
We're on episode 20, aren't we?
Something like
Let me just check before I don't want to get that mixed up.
uh,
Jeez. Oh shit, we're on 21. Okay.
are you
Yeah,
serious?
we're on episode 21.
Ooh, good for us.
Yeah, I think I picked this because I wanted something special for 21. That's why I picked it. I know you said
Special for
25, but 21 to
20.
me, you know.
Special for 21. No, that works either way.
Well, hey, we've never reviewed a show that's like 18, a full show, you know.
I know we
And
never
I'm
have.
gonna
This
put
is.
this out as part one and part two. I won't put this out as, episode da 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 da, and then episode. No, it'll be episode. It'll be part one of 21 and part two of 21.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I think that works out better. Just so we've got some breathing space in
well,
between.
also if the listeners, they like what they hear in part one, they could be like, oh, part two is going to be coming soon, rather
Mm.
than like it's all just in one chunk. It gives them something to look forward to next week. We'll get into this. All right. You are listening to Alternating with Eric, episode 21. Shit, we're on 21 now, Eric.
Yes, we are. Happy birthday to us.
Yeah.
Even
You
though we
can
never
drink.
did this year by year. Yes, I do have a drink.
For
Let me
us
take it
US
real quick.
listeners, they can, we're legal to drink. In New
Yes.
Zealand, it's 18, though. So we've been able to drink for ages.
That's what makes us awesome.
Yeah. What's the legal drinking age in Russia?
16, I think.
Shit, you guys got it early. Okay.
I think it's either 16 or 18. One of those two.
Yeah, 18's ours, so it'll make more sense. All right. So what have you been up to, Eric?
What have I been up to? Mostly been doing work. And in addition to that, just kind of also trying to spruce up my room. So I've been looking for a new armchair and some bookshelves to put stuff on, which hasn't been easy because I've been looking at secondhand stuff that's a bit cheaper, so better on my wallet than anything else. Um, and what else have I been doing? I've been doing nothing much else. I've been, what is it, trying to catch up with some of the games I played, but mostly it's just going back to War Thunder and World of Warships, which is still a lot of fun because there's a couple of events on those games, especially World of Warships, which is got an event called Dockyard, which allows you to pick a ship and then complete missions in order to gain building materials to build a ship from there, which is better better in its own way because it. I guess the way the system works, if I understand it correctly, is you just play complete missions, and you just build a ship from there. Whereas the other way is just keep playing until you collect enough points to unlock the next ship. Which for this dockyard event is a little bit easier because, well, the ship that's being built is a special event ship, and you probably won't be able to see it again for a while. So that's pretty much been me for this week, and well, work and training actually. With the training part, it's just been it's mostly just been me doing my classes and also helping out with some development plan for our other classes, really. So, and in fact, have been having a massive growth of students for one of my other classes. So tomorrow I'll be going there and seeing who the new people are coming along, and I'm a little excited, but at the same time, I am teaching self-defense to 12 years and under kids.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine how chaotic that's going to be, especially when they're, little kids high on sugar running around, and I am there trying to spend 1 hour, making sure they get tired enough for the parents to just drag them to sleep later, which I think has worked so far because yeah, I got a few kids basically complaining to me, going, I'm too tired," which is fantastic news to me, which means I'm doing something right. That's pretty much been my past 2 weeks. A little bit boring, a little bit mellowed out, but yeah. And what about you, Connor?
So I have I'd like to say for our listeners who don't know, I am at the moment I'm a temp worker. What that means is means what you think. I'm a temporary worker. I go for an agency. I get hired for building, packing, that sort of jobs, and basically I get put on for a certain amount of hours for that job, like until it's finished, and then I have to whatever time off until they call me again for another job. So I have almost worked like a full. It's been a I signed up with this company at the end of our. Well, I had signed up with them a little bit before COVID, but then I started getting work for them after our lockdown sort of went back to level 3, I think, or 2. So I've done maybe 2 jobs for them, and then this one that I just had recently, which I thought was a full month because that's what they told me. When I came in for the people working for them, they said, "Oh, it's probably going to be a month." Well, I don't know if I'm wording this exactly right because I'm still a little confused at this. But we did our job. We were scheduled for like a couple of months or a month or something, so a couple of weeks. I ended up working only like maybe 3 days, and then another 2 or 3, I think, between that. On this job because we ended up finishing earlier than expected. We ended up all of us and all the temp workers and everybody else, contractors, we all ended up finishing the job that was there way earlier than expected. So that was kind of good. I mean, they told me I did a good job, and I got paid for it. So
Did you get any
nothing
bonus for
wrong
it?
with that. I don't think so. I don't know.
No.
Yeah, because I think I just got paid a little bit more than I usually did because this is more than what I've usually worked.
Mm.
So because of that, I've been really busy with that. The hours were 7:30 till 4:30, and sometimes 7 till 4:30 on the Fridays. So
Oh my god.
yeah, so I've been doing that. So I've been kind of tired, obviously, from having to
Sounds like
wake up
it.
early. And then on top of having to wake up early, I don't get much time to actually do this thing. And I gave us this big challenge without realizing I was going to have this big job coming up. So I I rushed for a couple episodes of this, then didn't rush for a couple episodes of this. Like I tried watching 2 a night, and then it became 2 a night, and then I rushed for a bunch because I also, with my Steam account, they put up Persona 4 Golden on special. So I
Hey.
of course downloaded that, and I've been playing the
Oh,
shit
that is
out of that
incredible.
because I played the first Persona game on the PS2. I borrowed it off a friend of mine, finished it. Well, I think I partly finished it because he wanted it back, and I didn't get to finish it all the way. But I partly finished that. I had a PSP at one point where I finished all of Persona 3. I've finished like 2 once, I think, and never played 1. Played a little bit of 5. But yeah, this was my first time ever playing Golden, and yeah, I'm playing it on my PC on Steam, and it's pretty good.
Damn, I gotta see if
Yeah,
that's if I can download that. Unfortunately, I'm kind of.
$31 or something, so it was pretty
Ooh,
cheap.
that's gonna be a little bit. That's gonna be a little bit tricky since I'm kind of looking at my own Steam wish list, which I have,
Yeah.
and let me just give you an idea of how big that is. My Steam list is about 240 games on it.
I have
Yes,
I have free games on mine.
you have no idea how curious I am about some of these games. It goes from the most expensive, being GTFO, which is a horror survival, to the cheapest, not including the free games, which is a game called Bad Dream Coma
Hmm.
for only $1.
Hmm.
It's a point and click adventure where you just basically try and figure out whether or not you're in real life or you're in a dream and in a coma. Pretty self-explanatory, but it still looks pretty fun. But I'm probably going to try and get rid of some of my more strategy-based games
Yep.
before those, because strategy-based games are fun. Oh, but I am going to get Rock of Ages.
Okay, so so I've been just mostly doing that, and you got a massive list.
I do indeed, and I keep adding to it.
Yeah.
Mostly because some indie games come out that look really interesting, and you know, indie, in some indie producers do produce some really good games.
Mm.
Like my favorite by far is One Fingered Death Punch.
Mm.
Real simple game, real simple concept. All you have to do is press the two mouse buttons on your mouse, and literally that's all you do.
Mm.
But the epicness of this game is just fun. I've got the sequel on sale, One Thing of Death Punch 2, so I am going to put that in and buy it, okay? Because it just looks wackier than the first, and the first one was fun. Although, unfortunately, I didn't finish the last difficulty level of the first one, because, holy wow, my motor skills are not exactly up to par with that of a master, so a grandmaster, actually. So, unfortunately, I'm kind of stuck, and trying to see if One Figure Death Punch 2 is any better.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, what games do you have on your wish list?
So I have, well, some of these is because I haven't used Steam in so long.
Mm.
So I've got one on. I had Dead Space 2 on there, and I have that now.
Excellent game.
Yeah, I have that now. So I never finished it. I had it for a bit, and I had it through a bit. It was an EA Games or something, and they made you have some sort of shitty version of Steam when I had it, and it was just crap to play it through that, and it just kept on crashing and having other issues. And now I've downloaded it on Steam, and it should be a lot better because EA Games version of Steam, or whatever it's called, was freaking shit, and I didn't like using it. So I'm glad that I got that as well. I just haven't played it yet. I'm gonna get a better mouse because I've just got a laptop, that sort of laptop mouse that's on on the laptop. So I might get like an actual proper mouse since I'm playing a proper shooter. I was gonna get an Xbox 360 controller or some sort of controller.
I think they'll recommend. I think they'll recommend you an Xbox One controller that's even
Yeah.
more compatible. That's an even better.
Well, I couldn't find them for cheap. That's why I wanted to go for 360 ones because they're usually cheap and they are compatible with my computer. So
I think you can get a Xbox One controller for under $100 if you find one in a cash converters.
yeah.
So it's still not cheap, but it's better than Oh wait, hang on a second. How much did I buy my one? I'm pretty sure I paid $68 for my Xbox One
Okay.
controller. So, but that was in a JB Hi-Fi. So actually, yeah, give a JB Hi-Fi a go. Maybe you might be able to find a cheap one from there.
So I'm just going to say this while we're recording. So this might sound a little bit different. Those who listened to my Insert Cast podcast, they may have heard me do an interview with Paul Downs, and that might have sounded a little bit different. So that's because I have two sort of recording studios at my home. I have my room, and then I have another person's room that I do recording in. I was a little unsure of Eric's schedule today and what was going on with that, so I am recording in my room at the moment in my closet. So if you hear me, well, if you think I sound a little bit different, it's because of that. If you hear me moving around a little bit weirdly, it's because it is freaking hot in here. And I can't really do much about that, or else you're going to be hearing trade noise, cat noise, and everything in between. Even though I do have some good coat buffers and other things in here. But yeah. So just gonna say that while we're recording this. But I've got Dead Space 2, and I will be playing that soon once I get a controller or a mouse. I had Batman Arkham. I had Arkham Knight and Arkham Origins because I haven't played either of those. I'm not really looking forward to Arkham Knight. I'm actually looking more forward to Origins just because I don't really like. I'm not that great at driving cars in general in games. I'm great with motorbikes, but cars, for some reason, not the case. And the Batmobile, from what I hear, is not easy to handle in those games. So
It is technically a tank, so
yeah,
I don't think anyone will give you too much crap for that.
yeah.
But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I know my cousin's played what is it? My cousin has played Origins. He actually had a copy of
Mm,
Origins.
mm,
From what he told me, it's an okay game. But
yeah.
apparently one of the missions is a carbon copy of a mission from Arkham City, I think.
Oh, okay.
So essentially there's a bit of repetition from other games in terms of missions.
That doesn't
So
surprise me. Arkham City had stuff that was similar to Asylum, so that's not a surprise to me.
mm, yeah.
I actually the internet might not agree with me on this, but I prefer Arkham Asylum over Arkham City, just because I prefer in games to be walking around. I like if I'm walking around a small area to get to a bigger area. I like well, an example. This is in Arkham City. You have to like go for miles and miles. Even if you've got fast sort of travel, like you've got your fast batarang travel in Arkham City,
Mm.
it still takes you at least a couple. Like it takes you a couple minutes, sometimes even a couple hours to get like from one place to another place in Arkham City. Versus Arkham Asylum, like it's a short distance to get to where you need to get to. And then it's
Mm.
just a case of once you're in those buildings, like they're really big in the inside. But I don't mind. I don't know. I don't mind like walking around big buildings. I prefer the bigger buildings than like the long walkways to get to those buildings. That's just me.
Just just letting you know, if anyone playing Just Cause 3 or Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they're hearing us talk about this, they're probably going to scoff at us in terms of, oh, it only takes you 2-3 minutes to go across the map. Oh, how fun!
Yeah.
Because yeah,
Just
um,
that, and then also I prefer I don't know, Arkham City. There was a couple missions I didn't really, and there were parts I enjoyed, parts I didn't enjoy. Uh, I don't know. I just liked the small crampedness a little bit. Um, funnily enough, I'm in a cramped space, and I like cramped games sometimes. But yeah, I liked. I don't know. I liked a lot of the feel. I liked a lot of the boss missions in Asylum. I know a lot of people hated the end boss with Joker. I can admit that's not a great boss, but most of the other ones I kind of liked. Yeah, I just Arkham City was okay. There were what was pretty good, but I like Asylum a little bit more.
no, definitely. Um, I've definitely got a copy of Arkham City, but I've never managed to finish it.
Yeah.
I guess because I'm not that interested in that kind of superhero game, or really
Really? Okay.
superhero games in general. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I've never really taken that much of an interest in them. I can't remember ever playing any other superhero game
Yeah.
other than the Batman games and the
Spider
old
Man.
PS2. Yeah, and the old PS2 Spider-Man games.
Yeah.
Those were those were pretty
Mm.
clunky and really hard to play with because I don't know. It's just the way it was. But for me, yeah, it wasn't exactly something that took
Okay.
my interest. Um, because I used to just mostly play war games way
Mm.
back then. Like not even the Call of Duty ones. I mean the ones like dogfighting, warship games,
Ah, yeah.
strategy. Those ones. My favorite dogfighting game, probably still up to now, would be Heroes of the Pacific.
Mm.
And because I managed to find my favorite plane in that game, and it is the Catalina,
Mm-hmm.
the most useless flying bucket I've ever come across. Seriously.
Mm.
There is one mission with that plane where I've had to try and take pictures of enemy fleets. Now, to take a picture, I had to come in close. When you
Mm-hmm.
come in close to an enemy fleet, you kind of also have to dodge the anti-air fire.
Mm.
And imagine trying to fly a bucket like that around and it's slow. That mission took me about 20 tries to get that mission out. It's a nightmare for me. But in any case, yeah, that was basically my that was basically me and superhero games. I'm not exactly that interested in them.
I guess I really like DC in general, so I consume a lot of what they. I'm not big on Superman, but I do really like Batman and the Flash and a couple characters
Oh
like
yeah,
that. And these games just came at the right time for me. And Arkham Asylum is probably my favorite Batman comic. I will admit the games actually take a different approach from the comics. They're not as surreal and yeah, they're not as surreal, and they're a bit different in their storytelling approach. But I like them either way. But yeah, so that's on my wish list. But yeah, I've been doing that. Had work, a lot of Persona. Had to try and keep myself off a couple times because it's like, oh well, I've got to figure out what Chie's doing today. I can't not figure out what she. And it's like, well, I just probably quit because it's gonna, I will say I'm happy that this game, it is a little bit easier to save because the annoying thing of the Persona games is they don't autosave, which for some people is good. You're playing an RPG, you make it harder, that sort of thing. It's annoying though for people who've got work in the morning and you're like, I've got to quit this game, but I can't because I physically can't save yet. Like when shit like that happens, it's a pain in the ass. And there was one dungeon in this game where that happened, and I just had to play a little bit later, and then like finally wait until I was like, oh, I finally got a save point.
that sounds really
So
does sound really difficult.
yeah, so that's a bit annoying. I get why they do it because they've done it in 5.2. You can't you don't auto save. You have to save in the game, like, which I get. But at the same time, it's like, oh, if I start working, I can't. I can't always work I can't play as long as I'd like to. You know.
No, you definitely can't.
And
Unfortunately.
sometimes I only want to play for like 3 hours. And then I want to
Yeah.
save. Because there are like there's a couple bits in the game. Since I've played the first game, I know all the story elements, and I've seen the anime, so I know all the story elements. So I'm kind of playing the game, and there's parts of it where it's like, oh, this is dragging. Or it's like, hurry up and introduce the other character. I'm getting sick of just like, talk to such and such. Nothing happens. Go to, save. Then go to bed. Or like, grind. Then talk to someone. Grind. It gets a little bit monotonous at sometimes, especially when there's no when you don't know when your goals gonna come up. And I've had to lock up walkthroughs just to be like, so I have to grind for this many days, and then finally something will freaking happen. So there's a bit of that. Or I chuck on a podcast, I mute the game, and I just like grind through while I'm listening to the podcast. Kind of passively play it. I know gamers will be like, "That's a sin. That's not good. Like you're supposed to pay attention to the audio and all that." But it's like, man, the game's dragging, but I want to, especially if I'm playing an RPG and I want to grind. Like that's the best way for me grinding is to just sort of passively play it rather than get into it.
Yeah, I think it's just anyone's taste, and even then, no one really has the right to argue when they play RPG games, considering that RPG element games do come with the do come with the expectation that you actually have to grind, especially if you continue the story on. It does get boring, if you continue a story on with elements of leveling up and improving your character, and yet you don't have to grind to do it. But if they add in that kind of element where the only way you progress through the main story is if you level up a bit more in order to defeat enemies, is if you go back and grind. And then, going back and grinding might even give you a chance to grab new weapons, some other items you might need, blah, blah, blah. I found that out the hard way playing Final Fantasy 7. No, not 7, sorry, Final Fantasy 10.
Yeah.
But essentially, that's what made the game more enjoyable because I got to go back, find new stuff, improve my characters more, and then continue with the main story. So, no, I don't think anyone's gonna. No one really has the right to give you crap for saying you enjoy grinding in a game. It's something that's probably necessary if you want to continue on with the story.
I'm very passive with it, which is
like you pass. Oh, okay.
Like I put on a podcast when I do it. Like I mute the audio and I don't listen to the game audio. And I because it does get annoying for me just to listen to the music over and over again, like do the fight over and hear all the sound. And if I put on a podcast, I can passively play the game, and I can listen, and I can sort of pay attention, but I'm not like thinking how long it is that I'm playing for, and so I can just sort of keep myself playing. It's the same thing I do if I go for a walk or if I'm exercising or something. If I chuck music on or if I chuck a podcast on, although usually if I'm walking or running or something, I chuck on music. If I do that, I just focus on the songs I'm listening to, and usually I do like a whole album or like a shuffle or something, and usually by the end of the playlist or the end of the album, I know I've done I've done a whole hour or I've done 40 minutes or something like that. So yeah, so today we gave ourselves I put ourselves quite a challenge for this week. So this is a first for us. We have never, I think, officially have done a series over, we've technically reviewed stuff that's 26 episodes, but we've never reviewed a full thing that was 18 or 26 or whatever. We are going to review a 40 episode series, but what we've done, because we're so busy with work and other stuff, is I have separated this into parts. And the reason I've done that is because this is directed by two different people. So the first half of the show was directed by Tadao Nagahama, was directed by Tadao Nagahama, and the second half was done by Osamu Dezaki, who we will get into when we get into the second half. Tadao has not done really much else that I could even find. He's not really a massively well-known director. We'll get into what we liked and didn't like about his directing and that sort of thing when we get into this. The music, which I don't know if Eric will agree with me on this, but I thought was generally pretty good, is done by Koji Makino, and we reviewed episodes 1 to 18 for this half because that's what Tadao directed, and then we'll direct next week. We will watch from episodes 19 to 40, which are directed by Osamu Dezaki. And we'll get into this first half right after the break. So catch you guys then.
Within the first 18 episodes, within the first 3 episodes, the first major laugh I've had is the fact that the father could not keep to what other modern animes have managed to do, and that is disguise a girl as a boy, okay, for years on end.
Okay, so Eric, I'm gonna argue on this because one, this is a French. This takes place in France. That's one thing you missed out. So this is a French show. It revolves around basically the manga author who wrote this. Where is her name? Ryoko Ikeda, who wrote this, who also wrote Brother Dear Brother, a bunch of other stuff. Very prolific, influential shoujo author. She essentially created this manga with it being just about Marie Antoinette and following her rise and fall. And what ended up happening is she created kind of a side character, just one she created that's not a real person. Her father, though, Oscar's father, is a real person. Oscar isn't, though. And this character
I mean, I've actually looked that up. So one of the prevailing theories is that Oscar may be based on a real person.
So that could be the case. But basically what happened is Oscar, as a character, when I think the first couple issues came out, ended up being quite popular with the readers, and so the author decided that basically Oscar was going to be the main character instead. And so, and to argue Eric's point here about her, I guess your argument is maybe that Oscar doesn't look enough like a boy, which my argument would be
No, not really.
France
It's
is
not.
very feminine. They were sexually very fluid, that sort of thing.
Well, no. That's
A
not.
lot of them
That's
had
not.
long hair. You know, you could argue that Oscar
Yeah.
looks pretty
That's
masculine for French standards.
no. That's not really my problem. My problem. I could see that happening through the other episode, and I can see. I already had an idea of what the French courts had in terms of acceptance. No, my problem was, and not really too much of a problem, more of a massive laugh, is the
Yeah.
fact that when the father promised himself that he would raise Oscar as a son instead of a daughter, within, I don't know, the first few episodes, we found out that Oscar had refused this, growing up.
Oh,
Somehow, somewhere along the way, it fucked up, and now everyone knows that Oscar's a girl.
yeah.
I've got no problem
Oh,
with
so
that. It's the fact that the
you
father
wanted people not to, yeah.
it's the fact that the
Okay.
father managed to fail at something that
Yeah.
modern anime characters have managed to pull off better than he can,
Mm.
and that is keep girls disguised as boys.
We,
The
yeah.
plan fucked up so early, and I just had such a laugh
Well,
about that.
I think that's just done for the purpose of the story,
Hmm.
and there's elements of it where it works better if it's,
Yeah,
and there's elements where characters don't know and then they reveal it and things like that. But
yeah.
I do want to touch on one thing, just briefly, before we get into this as well, just how prolific and influential this manga was. So I might not be 100% right on this, but I know this manga was, while it may have not been officially the first manga to feature a cross-dressing character in a shoujo manga, it was definitely a notable one that definitely inspired a lot of people to create, these cross-dressing characters in shoujo manga. A lot of the dynamics and a lot of the flower petals and stuff used in the back, a lot of the themes, a lot of things that are used in this manga were later on carried on into other shoujo manga. And it might have not officially been the first, but it was definitely the most well known. And
Mm.
examples of shows that were influenced by this are, you could get into Revolutionary Girl Utena. That's probably the most well known one that people know. Obviously, anything else these guys have worked on, like Brother Dear Brother, which is the same sort of author as well. And, you've got even elements of Sailor Moon and plenty of other shows. Even, I would even argue Fruits Basket has had, you might not see it, but I could even say that some of the dynamics and relationships and the way it was drawn, there was definitely a lot of authors have cited Ryoko Ikeda as being a major influence. I think even Clamp have cited them as well as being kind of an influence for them as well. And this shoujo story, I would say, is, if you're not familiar with like shoujo that's not just reverse harem sort of stuff where it's a couple guys going after a girl, this is more like a holic sort of shoujo thing where it's just a general story that happens to be also written by a girl as well, and has that sort of female perspective and dynamic to it.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely follows the same way as well. And um, though I do, though I do think that looking at the first few episodes, it's a bit of a slow build up and a pretty slow introduction to some of the characters we know. I think let's have a look at my notes. I think some of the main kind of facts I saw in or interesting facts I saw in this is the fact that the main character's dad apparently has a bit of a temper, as as evident by the fact that at least within the first 18 episodes may have only slapped Oscar a couple of times on screen, but of course still makes you think how many times he might have slapped Oscar off screen. But it's
Well,
not due to the fact that Oscar's father is abusive.
Also,
Or
that's
that,
not
yeah,
uncommon for
it
back
really
then.
isn't. It really wasn't.
Slapping your child back then wouldn't have been an uncommon practice as it is now.
No, and especially since in French courts, where your influence and your prestige and your own personal image is, determined by your actions and your status. The father slapping Oscar whenever Oscar does something that could shake that sort of, image is, it's understandable to see on screen like that, but still, having a temper like that makes you think that, especially since the first time we saw Oscar's dad slapping her, it resulted in Oscar basically falling down the stairs, flight stairs, and you think, holy, what? Why? Yeah, I mean, the only other, this does also result in a bit of Oscar's conflict, because even though Oscar seems to have accepted her role as, as being more of a, masculine figure, despite still identifying as a woman in this, there's that sort of conflict, because she has other people in her life, like, like one of her nannies, who's constantly trying to, bring a more feminine side to Oscar, but Oscar's been grown up to follow a more masculine view of, follow a more masculine view, to take, follow in the steps of her father, who, was a commander in the French, with the French, what is it, Army of the Gods or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is prevalent throughout the whole thing. Although it doesn't come up that often, it is something that still exists in the back of my mind.
So,
and
yeah, I just want to get into one other thing, again, that we're gonna have to bring up, because it's gonna happen. So I don't speak French that well. I don't know if Eric does. I can speak a little bit, but my pronunciation of the names, Eric's pronunciation of the names, is probably going to be off the Japanese version of this, because there's no dub for this either. And I tried to find a French dub of this. I could not. But I wanted to watch it because I wanted to know how to pronounce all the names. But so we might mispronounce some certain names. We're going to pronounce them how the Japanese pronounce them, which might sound a little bit weird, because some of them... So we're not going to pronounce them as as much as, because there are certain names where it's Andre. We'll just say Andre, or Oscar.
Andre,
like they do sometimes in the anime.
oh my god!
And the one that I'm probably going to struggle with, but I'll get out of the way. There's a character later on who is a Swedish noble, who we'll talk about more him, but he is called Axel von Thurseen. I think that's how or Thurseen. I'm going to have trouble pronouncing that name, but I'm just letting you guys know we're probably going to mispronounce a bunch of these.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like we're going to get that much grief over mispronouncing names, since people might deny, I can pronounce the name better. Well, congratulations if you can. We have probably will never likely say these names again in our lives, so give us a break.
Well, maybe we'll do a history report someday on the French Revolution.
Please. Oh, please. If we're talking about the French Revolution, I'd have to speak to one of my old lecturers at my university. Because when I took lessons on Russian history there, he would always mention, I have a great, passion for the French Revolution. And he already provided such a good lecture on Russian history that it makes me think, man, if you teaching Russian history is this good, what do you like teaching French Revolution? You probably show some pretty gory scenes as well.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, it does also, I guess, also introduce another character, which is Andre, who is, as previously mentioned with the nanny, is the
He's
the
kind of
son.
He's
Is he the son? The son of the nanny?
No. He's the nephew of the nanny, and he's a servant for Oscar and their family. I want to state this now because it's actually a plot point later on in the second half of this show. Because Andre is not a rich noble like Oscar and the rest of their family. But he's technically lived with them a lot of his life, and he's technically a well treated servant because he doesn't get whipped. He doesn't,
He's like family basically.
He's like family basically.
Which is really nice to see, seeing as servants. Most servants are treated lower than, well, not to quote certain people, but treated lower than dirt.
Mm.
Even though ironically they are there to clean the dirt up. So,
Yeah. So,
but Andre, but yeah, the family, Oscar's family treats the servants pretty well.
mm.
Although the father might have a bit of a cold indifference with them, he's not overly cruel to them. He's yeah, they're treated with some level of respect, which is something that is refreshing to see, I guess. When you see royal families, they do treat their servants like crap most of the time. So this is a bit of a
we've
nice.
briefly touched on the first point of the first episode, but let's get into the first episode of this show. We're gonna talk about the first 5 episodes, and then we'll talk about the rest after that. But the first episode, we get basically what Eric just described. The father announces that his baby girl is actually a boy, and he raises Oscar, and all that happens. And then they get into a bit of a scuffle. I think Oscar refuses to wear some sort of outfit. Then wears the outfit.
No, I think as far as I remember, Oscar actually may have refused to uphold a higher status, which is basically being the bodyguard to Marie Antoinette,
which
and
she later basically she
agrees to because Oscar wanted to claim that this is her choice and her choice only, which it's a bit of an iffy argument to make on Oscar's behalf.
So
but
there's a lot of characters introduced in this first episode. It's definitely one of those shows that you have to pay attention to for a lot of the parts, because just characters will be introduced. You'll get their name briefly, and then you've just got to sort of focus on them, and they'll sort of introduce their personalities and who they are. And I think in the first episode we meet Oscar, we meet Andre, we meet Oscar's dad, we meet the nanny, we meet Marie Antoinette, and then I think later on we maybe meet Duke Orleans and maybe some of the other people that are going to be set up as our villain for the first sort of arc.
Oh yeah, that's the one. That's one of the things I wanted to also touch up on in the first 5 episodes, and that is during the escort service, or basically after Oscar accepted the role as Marie Antoinette's guard, and escorting Marie Antoinette to Versailles. We do get the introduction of the Duke of Orleans as the villain, and I enjoyed how he was introduced as the villain.
Sorry, can you give me a break? Sorry, just had to check something.
That's all good.
So, as you were saying?
As I was saying, what I really enjoyed about the introduction of the Duke of Orleans as the villain is just the whole setup. You've got what do we see? We see the escort beginning to move. We see Oscar looking over at the crowd that's there and just trying to discussing with her second in command and going, we'll need to watch out and make sure nothing bad's going to happen. Then you see in the crowd 2 obvious minions walk out into the forest and speaking to a god. And even though they do spoil who it is, it doesn't take away the fact that the way the Duke of Orleans was introduced, staying in the shadows, trying to cover his face, his voice, his mannerisms, and how cruel he is. It was a great introduction to him.
He's one sly motherfucker, and I will tell
you,
he is awesome, because he's in the first half of this, and he's also in the second half. And if you think like, oh, he's a great villain, and then he goes away for a bit, we get to see him later on, so you'll get to.
Yeah, he doesn't disappear, but I'll mention a few other pointers about him later on.
We also, I think we have to drop a spoiler tag. I don't know if that was obvious, but yeah, there's a spoiler tag, so we're going to spoil this. But yeah, so that's essentially, that gets established sort of in the first episode. The other episodes we get introduced to now. I'm going to have to remember this because I've written notes for the other episodes too, but we get introduced to, in the first episode, we get one of Oscar's friends. I think his name's Raspberry or something like that. He's one of the leaders of the guards, and he essentially
Later on becomes a friend.
later on
Raspberry
becomes a friend, but in the
was
first
the rival.
episode, there's a
I
rivalry.
think before they become friends, they were rivals for the role of Marie Antoinette's god, which is another word for, all right, who gets to spend more time with the beautiful princess? Me.
Yeah.
And Oscar's like, please let them have it. No.
Yeah.
Fine.
And in this sort of first 5 episodes, we get introduced to one of our leading villains, Countess Dubbery. I think I'm pronouncing that right, or Dubbery.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
Count Betty.
She's not bad sometimes.
I really like her, I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
Do you know why?
Okay, so...
Well, I like her for one reason.
Okay.
And that is that when Dewberry is introduced, my first thought about her is, what a bitch. It's like, if a villain is introduced in a way through their, characteristics that make you think, what a bitch, they're doing a pretty good job. I mean, there's other characters you'd think that, but you think of it as a more sarcastic, a bit more of a satirical way. For me, I legitimately do think Dewberry was also introduced as not to the same level as the Duke of Orleans, but close as a good villain. And I like her over a few of the other characters who play as villains later on. And actually looking up Dewberry as in historical, in history, I probably lost the thing, but Dewberry was definitely an interesting character, considering that her upbringing wasn't of royalty. She was a prostitute on the streets, who was taken in by King Louis XV of France, who was the king at the time of this anime's timeline, and taken in and showered with riches and made to be pampered like a princess. And that was the only thing that was keeping her there as a keeping her there. And she didn't want to lose all those riches. She knew she'd lose them as soon as Louis XV died and his son took over, because it's like, well, what's his son? Why would his son keep a whore in the palace? It's like, oh, that was his dad. I already got a princess, like a hot princess right here. But I guess I'm not sure how in depth I want to go into Dewberry at the moment, but I really like her as a villain.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I think she's really good for a first villain, but I do think later on, man, we get some great villain moments. Two things we can bring up in these first couple episodes that I didn't mention as well is so Marie Antoinette is introduced, I think, in the first episode, but she's not officially the
it's the second and third episode.
I don't think she's the official princess till I think the second or the third episode. Because
no, she is an official princess. Her mother is.
But she's not married. She's not officially to be married to.
No. With royalty, if there's a king and a princess marries the king, she becomes a queen. When a woman marries a king, she becomes a princess.
I think the agreement becomes becomes good when after a certain point, because I remember in the first couple episodes there was sort of an argument that maybe our villain Dewberry was actually going to be the one taking over this position, and Duke Orleans was going to be the next one instead.
No, Duke of Duke of Orleans actually wanted to take the position of king. Madame Dewberry just wanted to continue living in the Versailles Palace, in the Palace of the Versailles, so she can get showered with riches. She didn't care who she slept with, who the sugar daddy was. She just wanted all the riches. That's one of the things that I really liked about Dewberry as a villain. She was a villain with everything to lose, which made her dangerous. And introducing a character and villain that dangerous, that early, really set the stage, and I think really upped the how much how much tension there would be, because just like the idea of a cornered rat, you do not want to fight someone who's in a corner like that. You kind of want to be careful.
I honestly didn't, because I think compared to some of the other villains later on, she's not bad, but she's not as great. But I will say this, she is better than another character who is very similar. That isn't more of a noble, but they both are kind of the characters that have came from kind of low income sort of backgrounds who become these sort of noble life people. But I will say the difference in that character who gets introduced later on and this character is the difference. The fact that Dubbery is a bit more, well, I'd say one, the voice actor's having a hell of a lot of fun playing this character. She does a great job.
And the laugh Dubbery has, later on when Marie finally acknowledges her is just like, oh, that's awesome.
And and she's really, I don't know, I guess you could say she's not like a stilted character. She's very, she doesn't like, she holds her
own. Yeah, she holds her own. She can hold her own, despite the fact she has to, sometimes cry to the king about this and that. But she knows she has to because she only holds the power as long as the king's around. As long as the king favors her. She lets everyone else know that's the case. And that is such a power move. It's just brilliant to look at every time she uses it. It was so fun. Have we got any notes on that?
Yeah.
One of the fun things I see is what is it? I guess later on in episode, episode 4, 5, when we do get introduced to Dubbery and see how far she'd go, even conspiring with the Duke of Orleans to continue her lavish lifestyle. And one interesting part about it is just kind of how much tension and how much of how much of the expectations she has about the plan the Duke of Orleans has. And there was one little scene which is I dubbed as the jump scare clock, which is basically when Dubbery has a fit that Marie wasn't acknowledging her, she throws her stuff around, and one of these is a clock which falls on the ground. And at the end of a conversation between her and the Duke of Orleans trying to figure out a plan to continue on with this, the clock, which was apparently still working, gives a jump scare. And I was just laughing at that thing. But at the same time, I think they played the tension in that scene really well, to the point where, boom, scary noise. And it shows how much, how do I put this? It just shows how much weight the Dubbery feels on her to actually, pull off some of these actions to, continue her own lavish lifestyle. And I guess even earlier than that is, just kind of the introduction to court politics, French court politics, and how Dubbery plays a part in it, and how she's a cog in that certain machine that even the princess Marie Antoinette cannot ignore, which he has, and that.
Let's get into. We're almost getting into some of the other episodes, so let's get into those actually, because I think what we'll do now is since Erik likes Dubbery so much, I think it'd be good if we actually just touch on her sort of arc and some of the stuff that goes on with her as these episodes go along. So one thing that I will just touch on that happens, I believe, a little bit early. I can't remember what exact episode this happens in, but this is my second time watching this, and I completely forgot about this that happened. So at one point, because I was watching the show and I was like, oh, the tension's not that high compared to some of the other moments. There's, not as much crazy shit going on. And then within one of the episodes, Andre almost gets executed, and I completely forgot this happened. But basically what ends up happening, and Erik might not remember this either, but in one of the episodes, Marie Antoinette insists that she wants to ride a horse. She wants to be just a normal person, do all those things.
Oh my God, is that episode 8?
Yeah, and she...
I kind of ignored that episode. I didn't think...
This episode is important because what ends up happening is Marie Antoinette rides the horse. She doesn't know how to ride it. She almost gets, pulled away into, a river and is going to fall. And Andre basically goes to try and save her, and he gets he's basically being he in real life, this is one thing I had a problem with a little bit. He'd be dead in this scene. He's getting dragged by a horse across the ground for ages. He'd be freaking dead. He's like, God, their clothing back then would have not protected him, or he'd be at least pretty severely damaged. And basically, what ends up happening is he tries to get Marie Antoinette off this horse. Oscar comes in, of course, to save the day, but in the process, she ends up falling with the princess off those two horses and lands and gets like a branch or something stabbed through her. And basically, it seems like Oscar's got this kind of life or death surgery. It's pretty intense. And then what we find out is because the king has seen this happen, he puts the blame on the person who was handling the horses, which was Andre, and Andre is basically going to be executed. And thankfully, at the end of the episode, Oscar and Thurston, who we've brought up, Axel von Thurston, who's the from Switzerland, the noble from Switzerland, he comes in and helps out, and Marie Antoinette comes in and helps out, and yeah, so that was one thing I had completely forgot about, and yeah, and
I kind of dismissed that episode. I watched it, but I dismissed it because in following the flow of the episodes in the story, 5, 6, 7,
yeah,
I really like those because they introduce not only the court politics of the whole and the environment of Rose of Versailles, but they introduce how our main characters become involved in it. And then episode 8 seems like such a strange break into this. I was really expecting there to be some kind of high tension scene where Dubbery continues.
It's a good. I didn't see it coming.
But I don't know. It almost had nothing to do with the flow in terms of understanding court politics and how Dubbery wanted to continue to maintain her own power and status. And so the break kind of made me think, like, what is the point of this episode? The only thing I remember is Andre's, on how thankful Andre was for, Oscar helping him, which included some childhood scenes between them, which I really thought was funny and sweet. That's the only thing I found good about the episode. Everything else was just kind of like, meh. What's the point of you being here? Like even episode 7, where I got a couple of important points, where it was where Marie Antoinette was attending a ball, a masquerade ball, which was really cool to see because French were all about it. The French royals were all about masquerade balls, and it's always fun to see them, especially when everyone's dressed up in these bright and colorful dresses. It just looks fantastic. And the other point was something I quoted on as acting human, which is part of a speech or monologue from Oscar around how she viewed Marie Antoinette in this kind of world, about how she's, how among all the royals who act with such fake demeanor and, fake smiles and that, who pretend, to be kind to others, Marie Antoinette seems to be far more emotional and acts on that, and thus seems to be acting more human than the rest of them. That was a great episode to see.
Is that also the episode that Axel von Forcing is introduced in, or is that later on?
Did I put that down somewhere? Yes, I think it's the episode.
That is a plot point in one of those episodes, I believe, where she comments on the fact that she's driven by her emotions, because she does have a slight crush on Axel in the first couple episodes.
Sorry, slight crush. Yeah, I think going through all these episodes, we can see it's a bit more than a slight. Yeah. But you're right. Thank you for reminding me. The Masquerade Ball also allows us to, get an introduction to Fersen in that episode. So, that kind of development continues. And as much as I know that there's an important part to watching Andre escape the execution of the king, that kind of flow into that episode doesn't make sense.
I guess I will agree with you that it did wrap up a little too quick. If it was done maybe for a couple more episodes and they included some Dubbery and things, it could have been a bit more interesting. But we mentioned Thorstein, and we can actually bring up a plot point we can keep up with our sort of commentary on Dewberry and her timeline. So there is a plot point later on where and Eric will probably know what episode this is. She basically teams up with a friend to get forged signatures so that they can fake a letter from Forsing saying that there's a relationship between him and Marie Antoinette, which kind of funny that they're at the time they're like, no, we're not in a relationship, we're totally not like into each other, and then later on, of course,
I think that was around. I think that might have been around episode 7 or 9, or it might have been 9. But I remember that as well. That was that was a pretty
good episode.
It was a good episode because it showed how desperate Dewberry. And again, this is why I like Dewberry as the villain. It's showing how desperate she was.
I think it shows how smart and cunning and sinister she is, because she plots everything out pretty well, and then she basically backstabs her best friend. She actually kills
Was that woman even her best friend? I never got that.
It was like her close friend though. Like they seemed pretty close, and then she basically is like, "No, screw you! I'm killing you too." Because
which is a smart move to do. I have to agree on Dewberry's part. If you want to keep up with your your active intent to be better than everyone else, then kill even some people who consider you their best friend.
Should we also bring up her other attempted murder, where she basically she brings in it's so sad because she brings in this nice servant girl and she's like, oh yeah, here, drink this wine of us. And of course servant girl dies. And then she tries to frame it on Oscar's mother. And Oscar ain't having any of that.
That's right. That's right. Oscar was just Oscar pulled out her sword and was like, do not even try this again. You hear me? You will not try this. I will fuck you up if you try this again. Now, obviously they didn't say that, but that was one scene I realized Dewberry really was pushing it. And I can see the desperation increasing more and more. Because around this time, I think as far as I remember, or close to that time, actually episode 9, she became really desperate to that point when the Duke of Orleans actually abandons her. Because the Duke of Orleans realizes she has no more use for him. And so the desperation, escalates. Especially, after Dewberry realizes she can't control Oscar or, use any elements of Oscar's life against her. Which, it really drives Dewberry, to perform... to start losing everything. And so, her downfall was somewhat honorable for her character.
What episode does the downfall happen? Is it long
episode 9?
Okay, so episode it's not that long definitely. After all of this that happens.
No, it doesn't. Episode 9 is possibly my favorite episode out of all of them, out of all the episodes so far, because it shows the heightened tension between Dewberry and Marie. It shows, a really sad state of affairs that are happening. It shows the reality of, diseases that happen. Because in this episode, King Louis XV is basically stricken with smallpox and essentially is dying. And as we know, while smallpox, while in some way eradicated, was quite prevalent in this time. So no real medicine was created to hold it back. Think the bubonic plague, but on a slightly tinier scale. Anyway, this is where the desperation increases. People, are a bit on the ropes about, about how they feel about the king's possible eventual death. You get plots already happening. You get people who are trying to side with either party, Dewberry or Marie. You get You get our main characters, Marie, Oscar, Andre, all those, running around trying to desperately continue some order in their lives, and Dewberry is just getting up there in desperation. So she's trying to say, please King, please, my king, do not die. Seriously, don't die, because I'll lose everything if you do. Please don't die.
Well,
Obviously,
it's kind of sad actually because the king actually wasn't trying to get rid of her. It was in the end. It was he wanted a priest, didn't he? At the end, he wanted a priest before he died. And
at
it was
the end,
actually
no. At the end, he had to. He wanted to, because he knew he was close to dying, and as tradition, you can ask a priest. You could ask a priest to actually ask for a final confession before you die.
Yeah.
So as he is also royalty, and we know that bullcrap royalty in the church, he is allowed to have a Catholic priest to come and hear his confession. And then obviously we don't hear the entire confession, but we do in some way have an assumption that by the end of it, the king, would ask the priest, "Am I forgiven?" Yeah. And obviously, in some twisted form, the Catholic Church, wanted him to get rid of Dubbery.
Yeah.
Because if you're a Catholic and you essentially go against or kind of spit on the Ten Commandments, you're not exactly going to be shown in a good light to the Catholic Church,
which is why it's honourable to have a prostitute as your main thing, because he didn't
as your mistress. Yeah. Any other person, that's fine, but a whore from the street, that's going too far.
Yeah.
So this was basically what happened at the towards the end of episode 9.
Wait, sorry, Eric, did you say a whore from the? So if it was a whore from the nobles, it would be fine.
No. Well,
I don't think they had noble whores back then.
Sorry, if it was a whore from the street, that's a big no-no.
Yeah.
If it's any other woman, not a whore, that's fine. Okay, I'm pretty sure even one of the servant girls would be more accepted than a whore from the street.
Yeah,
which shows how twisted the society, the French society and nobles are in this regard. Yeah. And obviously, by the end of that episode, the king seeking forgiveness from God becomes more of an important step towards, final step towards the acceptance of his death than thinking about what Dubbery wants. Yeah. Which kind of is, which does kind of give me a conflicting idea of what's actually happening, which is, did the king actually care about Dubbery, or did he just keep her around because she said the
I think he was too sick to I think he was too sick to actually order it or any. I think the priest just made that decision, and the king probably said something before, like, I don't think. You're
right. It might have been in some way
because he's too sick. You can see to physically get up and command and do things like that. So I would imagine.
Well, I mean, he can still say things, but obviously the Catholic priest, for whatever way, could have twisted it because the honor of the church and of the royal bloodline of France, of the French family, was more important than whatever the hell the king wants because of Dubbery. And I think maybe at the end, he must have kind of had shown some sympathy towards Dubbery, which, you're right, might actually hold up on that theory, because Dubbery definitely held some place.
Some good closure, sort of at the. It's sad, her ending, but we get a nice sort of ending with her, and Oscar even feels a bit sorry for her and walks her out. But then what's funny is Dubbery, even to the end, is like, "No, I'm not taking your fucking pity." Like, thanks for walking me here, but no, I'm.
But Dubbery does try to mend some, or actually create some form of sympathy between them, for whatever reason. I guess because Dubbery finally realizes, well, I'm never coming back. Yeah. So what the hell have I got to lose? And obviously, I don't know if. Yeah, don't spoil it for me, but from what I can understand of the end of the episode there, where it just shows a caption about Dubbery's fate at the end, I'm assuming we're never going to see her again, right?
No.
Okay, no, I figured that.
So, no, Dubbery does not show up after that point. Do you have any history on her? Like, what happened to her after she got banished?
Dubbery stayed in exile for a while. She did return. She did return to the Versailles later on. Okay. Let me see. Yes. So blah blah blah. condition to sundown monthly. She was given permission to leave. So she what is it? She apparently went to an abbey.
Yeah.
Stayed away from the Versailles for a while. Fell in love with another man apparently.
Yeah.
Which is no surprise there. Hang on. She in time because I was too lost and sent a painting to me. Oh my god. So apparently it was actually a love affair between her and another man, and he apparently sent her a picture telling her to piss off. Written in English at the bottom. Oh, that's even more insulting. Hang on. Okay, so apparently she had a servant who joined the revolution, who became a revolutionary later on, and apparently let's see. Okay, and he basically ousted out Dubbery to the committee at the revolutionaries.
Yeah.
And so Madame Dubbery was laid down with charges.
Sorry, I just realized I made a mistake, and I just realized it now. So I mentioned Raspberry before, who was one of it.
Yes.
He is not the person I was thinking of, who's Oscar's second command, like helper person in the Nobles. He is a character that is introduced for our secondary villain later on. He is a guy who tries to help Rosary, who we'll get into, who later becomes a pivotal part in the second half, and he was a French revolutionary that actually tried to abolish slavery as well. That's not shown in the show, but that's something he tried to do. And apparently he's an evil motherfucker as well. There's some stuff that he did that wasn't so great. But we'll get into him maybe a little bit now, because we've.
Yeah. Oh, and before we continue, I just want to quickly end it up.
Finish.
Yeah. So just to finish off, so what of so after Dubbery's previous servant laid down charges against Dubbery, for what is it? Financially assisting enemies which led to the French Revolution. She was arrested in 1793, and she was condemned to treason and condemned to death. Sorry, she was accused of treason and condemned to death. And let's see. Yeah, that's right. And she was sent to the guillotine, basically. So on the 8th of December, 1793, Madame Dubbery got beheaded during the French Revolution. And let's see. Executed also around the time that Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette were.
Spoilers,
so that was basically
Eric.
Huh?
Spoilers.
What do you mean? This is French history. There's no spoilers.
Yeah. We should actually put the whole spoils for this entire show. Anything that doesn't happen to Oscar is basically French history.
well, Oscar's not even a real character.
That's what I mean. Anything that doesn't happen to her, so anything that happens to Marie Antoinette or anybody else, like it's spoilers, but it's also just French history.
Yeah, which is
like if you're watching the show and you're French, you probably know everything that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's not much of a spoiler alert then.
Yeah. So, like if I say to Eric, Marie Antoinette's going to die at the end of the show, that's not a spoiler.
No, it's not a spoiler. It's basically, okay, cool. So what else happens?
Yeah. So let's get into. So we have a couple more villains. We've introduced Doug Orleans, our main female villain. Hi guys, we're at the break right now. So guys, you may not know, but I do another podcast, not just with our great guest Eric here, but I do another podcast called Insert Cast, and we have multiple guests on that podcast where I basically interview people in the audio industry. And we're always looking for new guests. So if you know someone in the audio industry who would like to be on a podcast, please let me know. That can be a sound engineer or a musician or a voice actor or even a voice acting director. Anyone who's in the audio industry, all I ask is that they maybe have some knowledge of the audio technology. Doesn't have to be a sound desk, but maybe even just an amp, sound equipment. And if they have Skype or Zoom or some sort of way that I can talk with them. If they're outside of New Zealand, preferably, something like Skype or something like that, because I can't necessarily always do phone interviews with some of those people. So you can email me if you know someone at insertcast.co.nz. That's insertcast.co.nz. Let's get back to the podcast. Now we're going to get into, we get to see a little bit of what it's like for everybody who's not a noble. We get to see sort of the shitty life of people in the streets.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And we sort of figure out in these episodes that Marie Antoinette is, one, she's not seeing other politicians and other people that could affect change for her citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just going and hanging with Thursine all the time. And then the other problem that she's also having is she's spending way too much of her money that should be going to her people on clothes and jewelry and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And this is basically screwing everybody else, making everybody else poor, and what will lead to the French Revolution. And
I think I'll just add something to that. I think the saddest part about that whole thing is the fact that throughout, say, I think in the earliest one, which is episode 6, through episode 10, and then onwards, some of these episodes do point out the disparity between the rich and the poor. But the saddest part about this is the fact that the poor actually had some hope for as the royal heads change. They feel like the next royal head might make their lives better. Obviously it doesn't. And as we follow on, further on, down with, oh my God, I've made so many notes on these episodes. Down the line. Oh, here we go. Episode 12 to 13, I think, which is 13. No, it's not 12. Later on in some of these episodes, it does. It shows kind of how badly the royals are being thought of. Okay, we never get to see that much with the previous king, King Louis XV. But when it comes to King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, there's a far clear, there's far clearer views of what they think of royalty. When the peasants and the lower class workers have expectations for royalty to, for the heads of state to change something to help them, and it doesn't happen. That lowers not only morale, but also creates dissent with the lower classes against those in higher society. So, so when we see Marie Antoinette spending money and having all these gaudy dresses, not gaudy dresses, really pretty dresses, and spending time visiting balls and that, you kind of also feel like, oh, come on, really? Because the lower classes have such such hatred and such such bad such hatred towards the royal family that it shows. And even the main character, Oscar and Andre, had at one point gone to the countryside to just kind of ask, hey, what's going on? How's everybody doing? And it's like, you get the first visit from a peasant who's like, yeah, you're Oscar, aren't you? Okay, whatever, I gotta go. It's that attitude that kind of, we're lucky we see that Oscar is a kind-hearted individual. but
we see how savage those bloody nobles are, to the point where we have one that I would call cartoonishly evil, to the point where he's basically every villain. And if you've ever done a melodrama play, he's that twirling villain mustache guy. I can't even remember his
yeah,
name.
hang on. His Henry de Guimene.
See,
Guimene?
yeah, I can't pronounce his name, and I couldn't remember his name that well. But he
Yeah.
did hang with our buddy Duke Orleans. But Duke Orleans is admittedly a bit more of a well, he seems like a complicated evil. This guy is
Um,
your generic stereotypical villain, and
I'm gonna be honest with you right here.
I didn't like him that much, but I thought he was kind of funny.
I think the reason we might dislike Duke of Orleans as a villain is the fact that he's now being in the first 18 episodes, he seems to have been given a back seat as the villain in
Mm.
the series. Because when we see, because what is it in the first two
Well,
episodes, right?
he's
First three
let's be honest,
episodes,
he's kind of a shadow villain. He's not our main villain. Dubbery is our main villain on that first
but a
half.
shadow villain is supposed to have actions that help them continue on with their own, plans. Whereas
Yeah.
in this series with Duke of Orleans, he doesn't. I don't feel that anymore.
You'll get to see
Especially
him
with
in
the
season two. He comes back in season two in a major way.
maybe, but
Mm.
in the you know
Mm.
in some of these other episodes, where we have where later on, Marie has a new best friend who's a singer named
We'll
I've
get
got
into her because there's
yeah
she's quite a pivotal villain. But what I wanted to
yeah
touch on is this main villain here who turns up for one or two episodes. He basically comes into town, strolls in too fast. Some kid or something steals something from him, and he's not having any of that. He guns down this kid in the middle of the street, and then we get introduced around that point, to a character called Rosie, who's going to be important later on. She's kind of a peasant girl who secretly her
it's
family is
Rosalie.
is both royal, and she has a sister called Jean, who will later become one of my favorite villains and one of my favorite arcs in season two.
Oh, okay.
She is, in my opinion, if Dewberry is great, but she is like the second Dewberry. I just love her arc and everything that happens of it, and she does some pretty
Yeah,
nasty shit.
yeah. I did. I'm gonna be honest with you with regards to Jean
Jean,
Valose.
I think we're gonna call
Jean. Oh, it's Jean. It's how it's pronounced in
her. Okay.
French. So
Yeah.
in regards to Jean Valose, um, I honestly think she does seem to be good development for a great villain later on. But I think the one thing that really put me off about her, and when I'm comparing her to Dewberry though,
Mm.
is the fact that she's less subtle than Dewberry, like
Yeah, I can
way
admit
less
that.
subtle.
I can
I
admit
think
that.
her first real criminal act is basically after being accepted into
She
a
sneaks
fair
into a
lady's
royal
home.
family, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After being accepted into that and living a life, her own sister Rosalie comes to her and says, "Please, Jean, let me find some work to help our sick mother. That's all I want." Jean
Mm.
gets a paranoid sense
Yeah.
and thinks that Rosalie might reveal everything about her, even though I'm pretty sure Rosalie was such a pure-hearted individual, she would never do that. Like, seriously. And instead, Jean asks her boy toy,
Boyfriend. Yeah.
boy toy, boy toy.
Yeah.
We're gonna go with boy toy
Yeah.
to go and literally whip Rosalie
Yeah.
and tell her to piss off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, John, you bitch!
But
And
that's
then
what I
the
like
next,
about her, because she is a bit, but she kind of knows it. She's not like, and also I love the way she kind of manipulates that guard. Like she basically is like, yeah, I'll let you sleep with me, but you've got to do all this shit for me. Can you burn down the house for me? Can you can you kill this lady, make it look like
yeah,
an accident?
that's the second act. That is the second over the top act that I've
Yeah.
ever seen,
I
and
guess I
it's
just
just
liked the melodrama of it.
oh, it is just
I don't know.
messed up. John is just messed up. Like she is so desperate to keep this lifestyle
Yeah.
that she's been dreaming about.
Well-
She's just like, okay, I want to keep all this, and I'm willing to have my sister whipped for it. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
I mean, I don't know how historically accurate this part of her story is, but in season two, we
Keep
get
talking.
to see. we get to see a very important part in French history, which is the affair of the necklace, which I will get into in season 2. And that is one of the best arcs in this show, and is also mostly centered around her and some of the devious shit that she got onto, around this
Mhm.
time.
Okay, so I have gotten a little bit of Jean Valot's history up here. So there is some truth to that, but only when we focus on Jean. Rosalie does not appear to show up
She may have
anywhere.
not existed. That might have been a fake character for the show. You
Yeah,
never
I
know.
think Rosalie. I think Rosalie might have been created for, like Oscar, for the purpose of
Yeah,
creating a story to carry on and looking on as a outside viewer
yeah.
to how.
Because Andre is also not a real character in this as well.
Yeah, well, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah. So basically, in the early life of Jean, she was actually one of the three children to a previous royal.
Mm.
And so she's the only surviving one apparently.
Yeah.
And yeah, essentially she was forced into poverty, and basically was then rescued, and took up lessons and learnings, and just became the way she is.
Yeah.
So Rosalie as a character introduces a new element, I think, because it seems to create a humanistic side
Mm.
that Jean might be missing. So maybe Rosalie was created less to progress the story, or as be an outside perspective,
Well, we
but
also
as
see the
some, but as
nobles.
something,
Yeah.
but as something. Sorry, but maybe Rosalie was also created to just kind of make Jean question whether or not what she's doing is right or wrong.
Mm. I think it also we get to see the nobles in like a different light as well. That's why she's introduced. Why Rosette? Because as I said, we've briefly touched on him, this twirling mustache villain. But there is a pivotal part where he is basically he's friends of Duke Orleans but he is in the first couple episodes. He kind of helps orchestrate an attempt on the prince at one point, and he also, as I said, he kills a child. And then Oscar ain't having any of that, so Oscar basically challenges him to a duel. And their idea for the duel is that there is a certain reflection of one of the churches that is going to
Of one
shine
of the
into
churches is
Oscar's
going to,
eyes and blind her.
as cool as that might seem, I mean, come on.
But isn't it
Also,
cool that Oscar
also,
saw for it like after about 5 minutes is like, nah,
yeah,
not having
that's
any of
that's
that.
that's the
Pulls out
other
his
thing. They were
sword.
so sure that no one would notice. They
Yeah,
never planned to try this out.
yeah,
At one point, it's like, oh, I'm sure no one will ever
yeah,
notice this. Then next minute,
yeah,
wait, that leaf reflected light.
yeah.
There's a beam of light coming in. If I walk into it and look, I'm going to not be able to see.
Yeah.
Those crafty
You know
bastards.
the best part about this as well is we never see that villain again. He gets his hands shot and then he's like, no,
Yeah.
no, never gonna see me
Yeah,
again.
we never do see him again, do we?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
he's been so disgraced, he just disappears.
I assume like that hand wound must have done something really bad. Like he had an infection and then it got shot and then it spread and killed him or something.
Chances are that's probably the case since
Yeah.
bullet wounds. Oh no, yeah, that might be the case because I'm not
Who
exactly sure
knows? Who knows?
how much heat is left over from a bullet.
I'm not
I've
interested
got
in him to be honest. I was happy to see him go because he's just a twirling mustache villain guy. Turns up, I'm evil, boom, dead. Okay, like gone.
yeah.
But since we've touched on Rosalie, we can touch on the second, and in my opinion, the worst villain in this show, which is I think Polyneck. That's the way I kept on hearing it pronounced in the show.
Well, I
She
probably haven't spelt it well in my
Polyneck or
notes.
something.
So
I just went by the Japanese. They call her Polyneck or something like that. So Countess
Mhm.
Polyneck. She is a opera singer, and I believe she is a noble, but she comes from kind of a shady
She's
background.
actually
We
maybe
we
not
get
even
more into that in
yeah.
episode 19. We find out, then that's in the second half. We'll find out a lot more about her. But even then, I would say she's not that sympathetic. She's this type of character like Dubbery, where she's kind of not from a poor background, but she's had to work her way up.
Mm-mm.
and so
No,
she
actually, I don't think that's the case because as a
isn't she
singer,
very
she would
desperate
have
though, like Dewberry, but I would say she's a bit less
the thing.
interesting.
The thing is though, we find out why she's so desperate to gain the favor of the queen and actually attain riches because apparently she and her family were in debt. They actually
Oh
had a lot of
yes,
debt.
she's a
So
gambler if I remember correctly. She's
no, not even from gambling, from something else.
uh,
The gambling part, I think, was only introduced later, but I don't think we've ever been told that the reason she has so much debt is because of gambling.
mm,
But I do still stick to the fact that it might not be because of gambling.
yeah.
But in any case, it doesn't seem it does. The only way we managed to figure out that Polinick was going to, manipulate Marie Antoinette is because at the end of the episode where we're introduced to her, the ending monologue is, and so this comes at a time when Marie Antoinette never realizes that her friendship with Polignac is going to lead to her downfall.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for that spoiler. Thank you very much. Like some parts of these spoil it pretty badly, so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and
it's
she
pretty annoying.
is heavily linked to Rosalie, because the second death that happens in the slums is her mum just goes out for some reason to go see Rosalie, and she ends up getting ran over by Polinec's carriage, and this affects them. And this also introduces Oscar and Rosalie to each other, I believe, in this part. So earlier they are introduced, sorry. But this will tie into how they will connect because this happens. Rosalie basically has nowhere to go. She can't get a job or anything.
Yeah.
Her sister
The one
betrays her. And so she basically gets a knife and she goes in Assassin's Creed's the bloody tries to Assassin's Creed that lady and fails
Yeah,
miserably.
yeah. The one thing, yeah,
She gets the
I've got a
wrong
few notes.
house.
Yeah, I've got a few notes on that. Actually, the most important, the one most important development I liked about Rosalie is how much is kind of her own determination by
Mm,
the fact that she was walking to the Versailles,
mm.
which is kind of
That's some shonen shit.
which is kind of ridiculous because you think, geez, how far away is she from the Versailles?
Uh,
And if she has to walk all the way down until it would hit midnight, from what we've heard from a passing passerby, that means she would have been walking at least a whole day just to get to the Versailles, which is pretty good
yeah.
determination. And also, in case anyone wants to know, it was Oscar's mother that almost got killed
Mm.
by Rosalie
Because
because
she got the
Rosalie
wrong
had
house.
mistaken. Yeah, she got the wrong. No, she got the wrong person.
Yeah.
In fact, she also didn't because she's from a poor she's from the what is it, the slums, and
Mm.
basically part of the poorer class. She might have never ever seen the Versailles or even recognized it.
Mm.
So Oscar was the one who helps her
Mm.
and lets her understand, look, there's the Versailles. By the way, it's basically a heavily guarded fortress that you would never be able to sneak in, which kind of leads to a breakdown,
Mm.
from Rosalie, realizing how hopeless the situation seems, and then Oscar decides to go, "Oh, you know what? I feel sorry for you. Let me help you take revenge."
And
A
yeah,
bit weird, but
basically,
okay.
basically her and Andre train Rosalie, and we don't get to see any confrontation or anything like that yet. That's going to come in part two. But in part one, we do get a bit of a do get to see Charlotte, Polinec's daughter, basically kind of notices that Rosalie she does pretty good at passing for a noble, and then she does the wrong thing. She speaks she
Yeah,
speaks
she speaks
slang, I
in
guess. Like I
she
don't
speaks
know,
in the.
speaks ghetto or
I
whatever.
think it's the it's kind of the difference between current English and Shakespearean
Yeah.
English. There are some parts you can speak in a way, but people will
Mm.
see it and recognize it as, oh, you're not of this certain
Yeah.
degree
She
of
says ma instead of mother, I believe, or something like
yeah,
that.
something like that.
And basically, Charlotte notices this, points this out, makes fun of her. And this is an interesting plot point because it's going to affect something later on part two. But yeah, that was, and That's sort of, I believe, where we ended episode 18, is it not? Like, that's one of the main sort of...
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
I think that's all I...
Episode 18. Actually, the only thing I remember about episode 18 and how it ends. Are we allowed to kind of
Well, we're
discuss
allowed to
episode
spoil
18?
episode 18, yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean discuss. Okay, but anyway,
Yeah.
so two things I remembered about episode 18 is the follow up to the end of episode 17, murder attempt on Oscar,
From
and how
Polynesian
it kind of
people, I believe.
yeah, and also the ending of the episode, which was basically Furzin and Marie. Yeah, Furzin and Marie falling, finally confessing their love to each other, and I'm like, cool, long time coming.
Oh yeah, they basically bang. I forgot about that.
A2 bang, and you know what? There is the one thing I want to point out. A couple of things I want to point out about this is the title of the episode. Suddenly, like Icarus.
Yeah.
Which seems to fit pretty well, by the way.
Yeah.
Since when you get a high of any sort, you do come down pretty hard from it. The higher you go, so the high they would be getting from their love affair is going to fall down on them pretty badly. And the second thing I wanted to mention is that there is actually a book written about this love affair, and a historian, I can't remember her name, but she actually delves into the love affair between Furzin and Marie, with references to love letters sent between them. And what it points out is that out of the 4 children that Marie has had in her life, only 2 of them were with King Louis XVI.
Yeah.
The other 2 were suspected to be the children of Furzin.
I don't imagine them hooking up and Furzin being able to get a condom, something like that back then.
Especially since you realize that the condoms might not have been a thing around then.
Oh, no, we won't get into that, but that is, I believe, the existence of some... sorry, give me one sec. I believe there was some sort of stuff like that back then, but it probably wasn't as good as what we've got now. So, yeah, I would imagine. Probably, yeah. So, that happens in episode 17 or 8, cross 17 and 18.
18 is when we see the love affair. 17 I think the best part is in terms of episodes 12 to 18, these were some of my favorite episodes because these moments seem to have solidified a much clearer picture of the inner relationships between characters and the environment themselves. We get it. We finally get a solid feel of Furzin and Marie. We get a solid. We kind of get a new developing kind of conflict between Polinique and her daughter Charlotte, because as we can see, apparently Charlotte has fallen in love with Oscar, and she suspects her mother of planning to kill Oscar, and that creates a conflict. Then even earlier than that, we see further conflict between Oscar and her father. We see Polinique manipulating Marie. What else do we do? We even see how how Marie's lie about her being pregnant has affected her, and her how the fact that she had to lie, and apparently how she's so pure a character she doesn't want to lie, which I think is complete bull. And I guess the other 2 things I wanted to mention is the introduction to casinos and gambling in this, which is still a pretty cool thing, especially when they get introduced to a roulette, which I was surprised was used around
gambling addiction and things like that.
Yeah, pretty much that. Yeah. And the other thing is, that's the one thing I wanted to mention about Duke Orleans as well, further down the line, is that even after the disappearance of our
one sec. Okay, continue what you're saying.
Yeah, and further down the line with Duke Orleans, it seems like he's taken a back seat to his own taking a back seat to his own plans and his own places, the villain. And by the way, that cartoony villain you mentioned we never see again?
Yeah.
We see him again. During episode 15, when an inner conflict within the courts over the fact that Marie wasn't going to have a child yet was brought up. The cartoony villain, I'm just going to call him that. I don't want to call him by his name. Was there with the courts, And so they were riling up all the lords and ladies, as well as Marie, who was present, about the fact that she didn't have a child, or planning to have a child. And so it ended up being that the cartoony villain was kind of like yelling out, "Oh, would you look at that? Marie does not have a child, or maybe not even planning to have one. How ridiculous! Do we even need to have her or King Louis as our king? Maybe there's other better candidates, like, say, the Duke of Orleans." And even the Duke of Orleans is like, "Oh, no, do not point me out. I do not think I'm that much of a king." That scene was hilarious and solidified my idea that they've taken the Duke of Orleans as a shadow villain, a lot less seriously. Because his introduction was top notch. His presence later down is kind of that of a guy in the backseat yelling, "I'm still here! I'm still here!" It's like, we know. Why isn't anyone doing anything about you? You're brilliant. You had a brilliant opening, but they're just kind of downplaying you at this point, which is so unproductive. That was pretty much what was going on. And so, these episodes, between the
1 to 18, I guess.
Yeah, these were the episodes between 1 and 18. The only downside is that episode 8, I feel, could be skipped.
Okay.
Because it doesn't seem to play too well into the flow of the story. And episodes 9 to 18 are definitely worth a watch.
Let's get into our pros, because there's lots of things we could talk about with the cons and the pros. But let's get into the pros. Now, this is all the positive stuff, because I know Eric's got some serious cons that he wants to get into. But let's get into the pros first. The animation and the look of the show, I think, is generally pretty good. There are some stuff I will point out later on that maybe Eric didn't notice. There's one really... I wanted to screen cap it. There's a really noticeable animation error that I will point out when we get to the cons. But for the most part, the animation was pretty good, especially for this time period. This is 1979. And it doesn't look like a 70s show to me. I've seen a couple 70s shows, and this is probably the best looking show from this era. It's just hands down animation, artwork, all pretty good.
I will agree with you on that one. I really like this, especially since this is a show I wouldn't have guessed from 1979 to have such fluid sword fighting. Even if the fencing or fluid fencing almost mimics real life fencing matches, which I think was great. The other couple of things I like about the animation and about kind of the effects they did is the transitions. So even with the episode introducing Marie, there's transitions in the beginning of that episode, which I thought were pretty cool to watch. We only see it a couple of times afterwards, but that's something notable.
Can you give some examples?
I can't really remember. It's one of the later episodes, the transitions where I think with a transition with Dewberry in episode 9, and another transition I think with Polinique, but I might be wrong. And the other thing is, I'm not sure if this is a mistake you were talking about, but in episode 6, there is a scene with of the river in Paris. I think this is where it is, and so it included water effects there, which look way more realistic than I would think for a show from this era, which I thought looked really cool. So the animation for this I really did like. It's decent. It's decent. It's got some good movement to it of the characters, and it's something I like. Obviously, they do have certain parts where they kind of overextend everything, like the attempt on Oscar's life when a chandelier falls on her, and they overextend the length of the stairs by about double what it is. And then when we look back at a scenic shot, the stairs are shorter than you think.
Isn't it great, though, that there's no CGI shortcuts in this? That's one thing I was really happy with.
Absolutely.
Because that's so prominent now.
I wouldn't think there'd be any CGI shortcuts in this. CGI in this. No. It looks too good to even have CGI in it.
The thing you've touched on some film stuff in this, like, because this is really cinematic, and this is before Osamu Dezaki directed it, who's known for his very cinematic angles. There's actually a lot of his techniques and things that he would use later on that are actually used earlier on in the show, like a lot of his freeze frame techniques that are quite common in his works. And just the lighting and the shadowing, and I don't know if you notice this, like just the way they would angle things sometimes, the way they would
Well,
frame the
I
shots.
think I'm going to be honest. It's more noticeable in terms of. It was more noticeable for me during the dueling episode where Dewberry and the cartoony villain decided to fight, especially with the sunrise and the reflecting light off of it. I really thought that was great in terms of how how the effect was produced. As ridiculous as it was, really.
Another thing I wanted to touch on. So Eric may or may not agree with me on this. I think the opening's pretty fun. Whether you like it or not, you got to admit it's fun.
It is fun, but the thing is, you barely see it. Like the other than episode 1, the only other time I saw the opening was episode 10.
Oh,
and then a few times.
No. It's in every episode. The stream, the place you're probably watching it, just cuts the openings out. That's quite common.
Oh, in that case,
yeah,
decent.
Yeah,
but I would technically skip it over since it doesn't seem to fit with the whole atmosphere of the show.
It fits the theme.
Yeah, but it's kind of upbeat and I guess breathy in a way. It's like it's trying to be like that one overdramatic character that's trying to push themselves onto the center stage, and some of us are probably just sensible enough to ignore that person.
We're gonna get into our big con in a second, because I know there's something that's definitely gonna be a con between me and Eric.
I have 3 cons.
But first, I want to touch on, just before we get onto that, we've touched on it once before. Is it Jean or our secondary
Jean below?
Jean, the lady playing her, I thought did really good, and obviously we've brought up how great the lady voicing Dewberry was. And I also want to bring up how great the person voicing Oscar is, who I've got her name here. Her name is Reiko Tajima. She is mostly well known for this and Queen Esmeralda's in the Captain Harlock series. And she's great in this, and I've seen her in Harlock. She's great in that too. Most of the voice cast in this is pretty good, and they're all, a lot of them you won't know because they're all either dead or not in a lot of these shows. A lot of them, though, did go on to be in other Osamu Dezaki things, or a lot of them were in Legend of the Galactic Heroes. So if you ever watch that show, you're going to be hearing a lot of familiar voices. But I thought, some of the voice acting was pretty good, especially from Oscar and Jean, who's voiced by Yoeiko Matsukane. So, one con that I know Eric's going to have that is a pro for me, and that's why I'm bringing it up now. I actually kind of like the music a little bit, and I know Eric doesn't like the music.
I thought it was out of place with the whole thing, because this is a series about the French courts in the 18th century, correct?
Okay. See, I might score you here. I might score you on the music here.
Why on earth does the music sound like modern pop and rock instrumental beats?
Okay, I'm going to argue with you on this. Okay, so...
you can't argue with me, especially since this is stuff I heard when I was younger, back in the 90s.
I would
argue... So we're clear, I hear these beats. Just so we're clear, I was born, in a post-Soviet state. I would hear this kind of music when I was younger, in the 90s. How does that fit into that period?
I'm going to argue with you here because this show, what I liked about the music is it's a mixture of music that would be contemporary for its time period, which was 1979 going into 1980, but it also mixes elements of music from the Baroque period going into the classical. See, I can school you on this music here, man, because there's a lot of harpsichord music, Eric. Did you not notice the harpsichord music?
I noticed it. The thing is, in terms of the listening factor, it seems to be 4-1, 4 being to the classical pop and rock instrumentals of the 90s, which is something so distracting from the Baroque and the classical music that I think, why? Why can't you just keep to the... Because there's still some upbeat notes for that period to continue to keep.
I kind of liked it because there's a couple numbers here or there I like. There's a violin piece. I don't know if I hope you don't agree with me
Oh, I
on
heard
this.
the violin pieces. I thought they were immaculate.
Did you like
I
that
like
piece?
them.
Yes,
I like those. I
thank God,
really
because
like
you
those.
know the piece I'm talking about, where it's this really sad but happy violin that comes in. It's like, oh, gets me every time.
Yeah,
And
I
then
like that.
yeah,
I'm not arguing against you. I like that.
and there
But
is one
again,
piece of music that you won't like that was like a '60s, '70s Deep Purple sort of thing with a beat on
yeah,
it.
that one I dislike that in this
But I
whole.
liked it because it was when what was it, Rosalie's like going off to assassinate Polanik, and I was just like fuck yeah, I was like
I
getting
think it
into it.
came up. Actually, that
Yeah.
came up much earlier in one of the episodes around. I think episode 5 or 6.
Are we
It
thinking of the
came up.
same one where it's like an organ like and it's da da
I'm
da da
pretty
da da
sure.
da
I'm
da da
pretty sure
da.
I heard it around then
Okay.
as well. But I'll have to look back
I
on
just
it
know
again.
it's used in some cool scenes, and it
Mm.
got me pumped for a couple of those cool scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, yeah, so we're gonna disagree on the music. Okay, so the ending song is not that bad, but I don't think it's as good as the opening. That's what I've got here.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I never picked up on the ending song, as in
The
I
ending is a
never
lot
heard it.
more sad though. If your complaint is that the opening is not sad enough, the ending is pretty sad.
Mm. Well, I'll listen to it because I haven't actually heard the ending song.
Um,
But I'll take your word for it that it's
and then
sad.
one thing, maybe Eric will agree with me on this. I think the show, it's a good show, but it starts off really slow, and it takes a while to pick up. I
Mhm.
don't think this is a give it 3 episodes. I think this is give it maybe
It's
4 episodes.
that's equal parts of pro and a con. We know a lot of shows take time to kind of build up on what it's actually about. But honestly, the build up is worth it. Not including episode 8, is worth it because as soon as things start picking up after episode 9, you know,
Hmm.
it just the plots get deeper, the characters' relationships become more defined, and the court politics change in such a drastic way that it does keep you pretty gripped upon it. So, con, you're right, it is slow, but in a way that it
It
comes
picks
with the
up.
pro.
I think it
It
does
comes with the
definitely pick up.
pro picking up on
Yeah.
the story quite well.
So another thing I'm definitely going to touch on because I know Eric's got some, but I just want to touch on these.
Mhm.
This is a con that's been a con for a long time, and in the last couple of years it wasn't a con because it got sorted out. But this show was very well known in fan sub communities for a long time because it was one of the hardest shows to get licensed. The author of the show does not like, for some reason, her show's being licensed. There's some sort of issue there. And so this show didn't get licensed for a long time. It finally did by, I believe, Right Stuff Entertainment or something like that. They have officially, I think, dropped the license now and it's gone. But it is on the American YouTube page. I don't think we can access it, but it is on America's YouTube page. But yeah, that show is sadly, if you want to buy it from Right Stuff, which I think is the one that owned it, they've officially now don't have any more Blu-ray or DVD sets of the show, and that's kind of sad because the show did have a really good release when it finally got picked up, but it's no longer available. So that's one massive con I have to bring up.
So it's only available online without a
It's
physical copy,
available
or
technically. I think the company has issued a statement now where you can watch it on their YouTube page. But I tried watching it. It wasn't available for me. It said all private videos, which I assume that means I can't access it in New Zealand. That's what I'm assuming. So the other thing, because there's a couple of things, but I'm not going to bring them up yet because I know it's going to start a big discussion between me and Eric on it, because it'll probably be his con too. So I touched on the animation eras briefly, so I'm going to touch on them now in depth. Shit, just ignore that. That was my phone dropping. That is not a con. One of the cons that I will talk about is, and this is quite preeminent for stuff of this era, and it is done but now as well, a lot of reused walking cycles. I don't know if Eric noticed this, but there's a lot of time where they just reuse a lot of animation for the walking and horses and things like that. It's
I
not
don't
super
really.
noticeable, but it
Yeah,
can be at times, sometimes.
it is. No, actually, I noticed it quite often, but I kind of give them a pass on that since budgeting for shows back then was quite would have been quite what is it, tight.
Yeah.
So I can understand if they need to reuse or recycle a lot of the animations in order to save on budgeting. So
Yeah.
I think it is a con, but I feel like giving them a pass on that just
Now-
because, budgeting wise, it's something that could be, that could be understood.
Now, episode 10 has a animation error that I wanted to screen cap. This is the one I was going to talk about. Episode 10 in general had some animation issues where a couple times it wasn't great. But one very prominent one that I wanted to send you a photo of, and you should definitely pull this up after we've talked about this. There is a shot where Rosalie is running after a... let me see. There is a shot in this episode where Rosalie is running after a carriage, and she's midway in shot getting close to Andre and Oscar. And in the shot, her hair suddenly changes color from yellow to black.
To brown?
No, to black.
To black. Oh, yeah, no. I've
so you noticed that too?
I noticed that. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I thought that was just...
I stopped and was like, oh, shit, I didn't notice this last time.
I thought it was just the shadow of, something else.
Black.
But now that you mentioned it, oh my God.
I think what happened is someone who was animating it must have got the model confused for Jean or whatever. It just went, she's black. Or must have been something to do with the fact that Andre's in the shot as well. And they're like, oh, that person has black hair. This person must also have black hair. So, yeah, there's that error. And I will also say the nanny at times was very annoying. The nanny character. I don't know if you agree on that.
Yeah. The nanny character... I don't know what her role is. It seems to be her role is to continue with annoying Oscar to show off her more feminine side. But at this point, it's like, is there really any point to continuing this? I mean, come on. We know Oscar's might have a feminine side.
She's also the worst acted character, I think, in the show at times as well. She's just way.
Yeah, I think one of my notes includes her early on, but I didn't mention it because of it might be a bit humiliating, but drunk grandma seems to fit her quite well.
Yeah. So we're going to get into one con that I know Eric might have on his list, and I think this is going to be the big one, which is the acting in this show and the drama of the show. I kind of like it because I come from a theater and play background, and I think if you watch the show and you look at it as kind of like a play, and I think if you get through the first couple episodes, after a while, you get kind of used to some of the over-dramatic and the silliness of it. But I can admit, if you're watching the first 2 or 3 episodes, it can take a while to get used to, and it can seem a bit silly. And I assume that's a con for Eric.
Well, in some way, the acting does get a bit corny sometimes, and
it's a bit cheesy sometimes.
It is quite cheesy. In terms of Marie's acting, when I briefly looked at her own history, the way she was described as, and kind of a few because I also listened to a few podcasts on Marie's history, and I gotta say it might fit her pretty well, because Marie Antoinette could be described as a very upbeat child who loved the arts and music and the freedom of life. This is quite I think with Marie's character and the acting was portrayed quite close. Well, the one downside I have to her own acting is the fact that in history it has portrayed that Marie wasn't technically a ditzy blonde who completely mistaken everything. She has some intelligence to her, enough to actually be a well-known musician, by the way, because she actually also managed to play a few musical instruments like a harp. So this is something I kind of...
does she degent, Eric, though?
Huh?
Does she degent?
She does degent. She does indeed. That's my only downside to Marie's acting, is the fact that she's quite mostly acts like a ditzy blonde, where that could be toned down a bit considering history might portray her in a different way. But yeah.
Yeah, so the acting is a bit cheesy, it is a bit hokey, it can be a bit girly, the show, but I think if once you accept it, you get used to it. And as I said, this is kind of like a play, to the point where in Japan they have done something called Takara no Zuka, which is all female actors. Like everybody in the cast is female, which is perfect for this show. And it's basically a play version of this anime, and it works pretty good. I've seen some videos of it, and it wasn't too bad. The music is kind of similar to the music of the show, and yeah, I generally liked the performances and stuff. So there's that cool thing. But that's mostly my cons for this show. What are your cons, Eric? You should give main ones.
So I have two cons that also count as pros in of themselves. I'll give my first pro con as it is. It's a bit. It might just be me, but it's something that's kind of been nagging at me while I was watching this whole thing. Is the disparity in topics, or disparity in development versus the topic. So we know the show's topic revolves around France, to coming close to the first one of its revolutions, the ones towards the end of the 18th century. Now, this also, there's a lot of that coming up. The build up towards the revolution is there, but it seems to also be in conflict with with the development of the characters, and how, I'm a bit iffy about it, because it makes me feel like there's two stories being told. One is the French Revolution, the other is the set of stories about these characters. For me personally, the con for me is that conflict seems to just kind of put me off a bit.
Your issue might be the directing rather than the story, the focus.
In some way, that's just a personal gripe of mine, because knowing how important French revolutionary history is, and how it changed the country over the years, even the multiple revolutions that have happened over and over again. The build up to this one important revolution through this series is, I don't know, it seems to be in conflict with the development, the story of the characters and how they develop. Because we only see a few episodes where the disparity between the poor and the rich is, exists, but then it's immediately kind of swept aside for the characters and what they do.
Yeah.
And so the focus seems to shift around quite a bit, and I feel like, I mean,
it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are with the second half, if this is still an issue.
Yeah, these are only my thoughts towards the first 18 episodes. So I guess if I watch the next next 18 episodes, my mind might change.
Yeah.
And my next con would be the fact that this is a shoujo manga this is an anime based off a shoujo manga. So basically, this is like a big difference to what the characters would, some of these historical figures would be in relation to the characters. So, as I mentioned earlier with Marie Antoinette's acting, I would have liked to see a bit of mention to the fact that she had the intelligence to be a musician and play all these instruments, because, the introduction to her being a ditzy blonde was a bit off-putting. The other thing is, it being a shoujo anime is far less serious. So a lot of the pretty
bromance,
a lot of that is prevalent through this, and off-putting to the fact that, to the seriousness of the situation, where we see this. What is it? I see episode 18, where there's in the beginning of this episode there seems to be some form of connection between Furzan and Oscar, and I think to myself, I'm sorry, what is going on? We just had something serious, and it's you two, and there's a possibility of a love affair between you two. You're insane. What is going on? So that's kind of one of the off-putting factors about the about this being off of a shoujo manga. All good. I've got nothing against shoujo manga, but when you put it together with a serious topic like French Revolution, there's elements that don't work. There's a lot of elements that don't work. They really don't work.
Do you like the show? So let's get into our final and overall thoughts. Do you like the show overall? Are you excited to keep watching it?
I am excited to keep watching this.
Would you watch it again?
Yes, I would watch it again, but mostly past episode 9, because I cannot. I don't think you need to watch much of the first episodes. Episodes 8 and the before that to kind of get an idea of what's going on.
Okay.
You could actually start this from episode 9 and still build up from that.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a little confused, it's so you're going to go back to the start of it. But the fact that you can actually start this episode off with a king dying, individual characters being desperate for via power, it makes you feel like great. It's court politics and the changeover for a new king. We've read about this before. For anyone who's got a massive interest in history and especially French history would probably like this. And there's a lot of events and a lot of characters that are real life and have quite a lot of involvement. So to see them early on, especially episodes 9 and after that, is really fun. It's just a lot of fun to watch this. So I'd recommend watching this, and I cannot wait to see episode 19 and after that, because it's just so fun so far.
So yeah, I really like the show, of course, because I recommended it, and I think the second half is better though. I do think the pacing and the stuff that we're going to see later on, it's a lot more gripping. When I watched the show the first time, I had the same problem that Eric had. The first couple episodes before maybe episode 9 didn't quite get me, and then episode 9 I was watching a bit more, especially with the stuff with Dubbery, and then once we got to the second half, I was just hooked on the show. So looking forward to that. Next week we will be reviewing the second half of this from episodes 19 to 40. So you can look forward to that. This has been Alternating with Eric.